What's up, millennials? So in this video, I'm going to give you some examples of industries and companies that could be disrupted during this decade. And I'm also going to give you examples of companies that can benefit from that disruption. When you're done watching this video, let me know in the comments below which industry do you think is going to be disrupted this decade and which companies do you think could benefit from that disruption. Alright, with that being said, let's get right into it. So usually what we do is we talk about good companies to invest in, right? Good ideas. But in this video, we're going to talk about bad ideas, so possibly bad companies to invest your money in. And for that, we're going to be using this report. This was a white paper that was published by ARK Invest. And it's got this title, Bad Ideas Report, the industries that could be disrupted by innovation. So as I've said, this was actually published by ARK Invest. ARK Invest, if you don't know them yet, it's a very interesting investment firm. And what they do is they invest in disruptive innovation. They also have their own ETFs, which could be very interesting for you to check those out. So let's just take a look. The 5 industries that we are going to take a look at in this video are the following. So we've got the physical bank branches, the brick and mortar retail, linear TV, freight rail, and traditional transportation. Now let's start with the first category, the physical bank branches. I'm talking here about physical banks, so like in real buildings, right? I can't even remember the last time when I actually went to a physical bank. And on top of that, I can't even remember the last time I used cash, because right here in the Netherlands, I pretty much always use a debit card. I believe that's quite different in the United States, for example, where cash is still used quite a lot. But where I live, so in the Netherlands, yeah, almost all payments have become digital. It's like ARK says, right? We now have digital wallets. We now have banks in our pockets. I really like that part, the banks in our pockets. So what ARK also says is that these banks have very expensive physical infrastructure that has now become almost useless, which equals to hundreds of billions of dollars. And if we look at this graph over here, we can see that banks are already slowly dying, right? In this figure, we can see a comparison between a bank like Wells Fargo and companies like Cash App, right, which is owned by Square, and Venmo, which is owned by PayPal. So Wells Fargo is the pink or red line. I'm not entirely sure which color it is. And as we can see, it's almost flatlining, right? Whereas if you look at Cash App and Venmo, so the purple and the green line, we can see almost exponential growth. I believe it's usually more difficult for established companies, established banks, to change their business model than it is for a completely new company to focus 100% on digital payments. Because I believe that new companies can simply move faster. Okay, so what kind of companies could be disrupted in this industry? Well, of course, physical banks, right? Banks like Wells Fargo, JP Morgan, Citibank, etc., etc. And what kind of companies could benefit from this? Well, online payment providers like Square, PayPal, Adyen, for example. These are very good, very big companies as well that can definitely benefit from this disruption in this industry. Now let's go to the second category, which is brick and mortar retail. This is very similar to what we have just been talking about, but then with regards to retail and commerce. So I'm talking about physical shops, physical malls, things like that. Because not only banking has become more digital nowadays, but shopping has become more digital as well. And that's only growing and growing. This is called e-commerce, of course. Now, if we look at figure number 4 over here, we can see the retail in the US. So e-commerce versus non-e-commerce. The colors might actually be a little bit difficult to see right here, but non-e-commerce is the dark blue or dark purple color, whatever you want to call it, and e-commerce is the light purple one over here, right? So as we can see in this graph, up until 2005, non-e-commerce was actually booming. Since then, it has actually been going sideways pretty much, and ARK believes that in 2025 it will have come down quite heavily. E-commerce, on the other hand, is evolving more and more, and ARK expects a major increase in the next probably 5 years. So it almost looks like if you would invest in e-commerce right now, it's almost like investing in non-e-commerce back in the 1950s or something like that. Only this time, I'm sure that, well, e-commerce adoption is going to grow way faster than non-e-commerce adoption in the last like 70 years or something like that. I wouldn't be surprised even if these 2025 numbers, these 2025 estimates by ARK, are even on the low end. So what kind of companies would be disrupted by this? Well, you could think about department stores, malls like Nordstrom and Macy's, for example, right? And what kind of companies could benefit? Well, you could think about Shopify, Alibaba, Amazon, and I'm not sure if you noticed, but I highlighted this part over here, that during the next few years, drones will deliver packages. And that made me think, are there any good drone stocks out there? Because that could be a very interesting niche to invest in right now, right? But actually, I couldn't really find many drone companies, possibly like Amazon in the future. So if you have any good suggestions, any good drone stocks, then definitely let me know in the comments, because I would be very interested in investing in those kind of stocks right now. Then the third category would be linear TV. So this is TV at scheduled times, right? So you turn on the TV and you cannot decide what you want to see because there is simply a schedule, right? So this is versus something that's apparently called over-the-top services or OTT services. I never heard of that before. So ARK says that $442 billion in linear TV market cap is actually ripe for disruption. Now, the enemy of linear TV being, of course, streaming services, right? They are actually, as ARK says, driving cord cutting. I really like that visualization, the cord cutting one. I was actually imagining people like literally taking their scissors and cutting the cords of their televisions. So according to figure 9, there are lots of people actually cutting cords, so to say. Since 2010, the amount of linear TV households in the United States has been declining very rapidly. I don't even own a TV myself. What I do have is a projector that I can connect to my laptop. So then I just project movies and series and Formula One on my wall using the projector. It's pretty cool, actually. So what kind of companies would be disrupted by this? Well, of course, the linear TV companies like Discovery and Fox, for example. And what kind of companies could benefit? Well, think about, of course, Netflix and also Disney. Disney is a little bit in between, of course, but it does look like they want to fully focus on streaming, which I actually covered in another video that I made a few weeks ago. And then industry number 4, which is freight rail. So basically using trains to transport cargo, right? Just like these trains in this image over here. So why are these companies going to be disrupted? Well, we are going to have autonomous electric trucks, probably, that are going to be very cost efficient, especially compared to freight rail. We're also going to have flying drones. We're probably going to have rolling sidewalk robots. So these are generally faster solutions and they are usually cheaper as well. Plus, they can also bring products from door to door, which actually solves the problem of the so-called last mile delivery. With freight rail, you can only bring it from train station to train station, so that is actually a problem. So which companies could be disrupted by this? Well, think about the railroad companies, of course, like Union Pacific, Norfolk Southern, Canadian National Railways, things like that. Now, I'll be honest, because I was actually looking at the graphs of these companies, and they actually still do pretty well. But of course, the difference is with the other industries that we have been mentioning before, is that autonomous trucks, flying drones, and sidewalk robots rather, aren't a reality just yet. But I do believe that this is going to change in the future and probably within this decade. And then which companies would benefit from this? Well, again, I would say Amazon, for example, and of course also Tesla, especially if they can produce a fully autonomous electric truck. And again, if you see any public drone company that is becoming like the #1 in the industry, then definitely pay attention to that. I am actually going to do exactly the same. And then the last industry we're going to talk about today is traditional transportation. So this is quite similar to the previous category, right? ARC says that there will be robo-taxis that can reduce the cost of point-to-point mobility. So imagine this future, right? You buy a fully autonomous Tesla. While you're not using it, you're working or whatever you're doing, you lend your Tesla to other people. You simply say, okay, my car is available as a robo-taxi for the next 5 hours. So your car goes around the place, it picks up people, it drops off people, and those people are going to pay you for that service. So basically by buying a fully autonomous Tesla, you can get some passive income. How awesome would that be? Anyways, something that's also important to take into account is the oil demand, because as ARC says, it could be much sooner than expected if electric robotaxis displace traditional cars. Let's just take a look at figure 19 over here, in which we can see the oil demand forecast by BP on the one hand and by ARK Invest on the other hand. Now, BP actually says that it's going to stay steady for the next 35 years, while ARK says that it's actually going to decline with EV adoption, which is the green line, which is slightly declining, and especially with EV adoption and autonomous driving, right, which is the purple line you can see over there. So which companies would be disrupted by this? Well, think about car companies, car rental companies, for example. We already saw what happened to Hertz this year, right? And Avis is probably, well, next if I had to guess. But also think about oil companies like BP and Shell. If they don't focus 100% on sustainable energy, then I'm actually afraid that their future is very limited. And which companies could benefit from this situation? Well, of course, think about companies like Tesla, who make autonomous electric vehicles, but also think about companies like Luminar, for example. Luminar is actually a company that's going public via a SPAC later this year. It has a ticker symbol GMHI if you're interested, and I actually might do a video about Luminar somewhere in the future in the next coming weeks. Okay, so there you go. 5 industries that could be disrupted in the future and possibly even within this decade. My question to you is, which industry do you think is going to be disrupted? And which companies do you think could benefit from that disruption? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye!